So I want you to picture the room. You probably know the exact one I'm talking about.
Oh, absolutely.
It's arguably the most iconic interior in the American political landscape.
Yeah.
You have that long polished mahogany table, the light streaming in through the tall
The
windows.
chairs with the little nameplates.
Right, exactly. The president sits right in the center. The vice president is opposite, and arranged all around them are the titans of government. The Secretary of State, Defense, Treasury.
It looks like the absolute command center of the free world.
Yeah, the place where the buttons get pushed.
It's the classic image of authority. I mean, when we think of the administration, we are picturing that specific table.
But here's the thing that completely derailed my understanding when I started digging into the sources for this deep dive.
Yeah.
That room, that specific body of people.
Yeah.
Technically, if you look at the rule book, the U.S. Constitution, it just doesn't exist.
It is a massive curveball to start with, isn't it?
It really is.
We assume the cabinet is this bedrock institution, like a fourth branch of government almost. But if you scour the Constitution, word for word, you will not find the term cabinet anywhere.
Which feels like a glaring oversight, right? Like forgetting to write engine in the schematics for a car.
Right.
But the sources suggest this wasn't an accident at all. This was a feature, not a bug.
Precisely. The Founding Fathers, and specifically Alexander Hamilton, were looking at the British system, and they were terrified.
Because of the King's Council.
Exactly. In Britain, the king had a council, and if the council made a terrible decision, the king could just shrug and say,
So, well, the committee voted for it.
"Don't look at me, it's the ultimate liability shield."
I didn't crash the economy, the council did.
And the founders wanted a singular executive. They wanted one person to be responsible. If the ship hits an iceberg, they wanted you to know exactly whose hand was on the wheel.
So they feared that a constitutionally mandated cabinet would just, dilute accountability.
Yes. So Article 2 is incredibly sparse. It just says the president may require opinions in writing from the principal officers.
Opinions in writing.
That's it.
That sounds like a manager who is actively trying to avoid a Zoom call. Just email it to me. I don't want to talk to you.
That is effectively the constitutional prescription.
Oh,
There is
stuff out.
absolutely no requirement for them to meet. There's no requirement to vote. The president doesn't have to listen to a single word they say.
Wow.
The whole concept of a cabinet meeting is just a tradition. It was started by George Washington, and it just stuck.
So we are looking at a paradox today. A group of people who run massive billion-dollar chunks of the government, yet have no constitutional right to actually meet as a group.
It's a fascinating dynamic.
Today we're going to unpack who these people are, why on earth they would even take the job, given the risks, and the big question our sources raise in the modern era: do they actually matter? Or is the real power happening somewhere else entirely?
And we have some really interesting comparisons to make, looking at the recruitment struggles, the theater of the meetings, and specifically the contrast between the Biden era and the projections for the 2025 Trump cabinet.
Let's start with the recruitment.
Yeah.
Because before reading the source material, I just assumed the president drafts a dream team.
Right.
You win the election, you pick the smartest people in the country, you put them in the room, but the mechanics of the U.S. government make that incredibly difficult.
It is a logistical nightmare, and it comes down to the separation of powers.
How so?
Well, in a parliamentary system like the UK, the prime minister just looks at the backbenches of parliament, points at a few senior allies, and says, "You're the foreign secretary." And here's the key difference. They keep their seat in parliament.
Oh, I see. So if they get fired from the cabinet, they just go back to being a regular legislator. They have a built-in safety net.
Exactly. But in the U.S., Article 1, Section 6 says you cannot serve in Congress and the executive branch at the same time. So if a president wants a sitting senator to be the attorney general, he has to ask that senator to completely resign their seat.
That is a massive ask. You're asking someone to give up a 6-year term with prestige, basically tenure, for a job that serves at the pleasure of the president.
Yes.
Meaning you could be fired over a disagreement 6 months later and end up totally unemployed.
It's a huge gamble, and we saw this play out vividly in the first Trump administration. He wanted Jeff Sessions, who was a sitting senator for attorney general.
Right, you remember that.
Sessions had to burn his boats to take the job, and we know how that ended. It was a very turbulent tenure, and he ended up out in the cold. It makes the hard sell very real for any incoming president. Tom Price was another one who left Congress and had a very short stint.
So if the senators are too scared to jump, where do they actually find these people? The sources lay out a few talent pools that presidents usually dip into.
There are four main buckets. First, you have the state governors. People like Sonny Perdue or Rick Perry.
The logic there is that they've run a bureaucracy before.
Right. Exactly. They know how to operate a machine.
Which translates well. I mean, a state is just a mini country. If you can run Texas, you can probably run the Department of Energy.
Theoretically, yes.
Mm.
Then you have the big city mayors, similar vibe, Anthony Fox, Julian Castro. It's executive experience, but on the ground level.
Makes sense.
Then you have the bucket that I find the most interesting, the academics.
The subject matter experts.
Right. Think of Stephen Chu or Onis Moniz running the Department of Energy under Obama. These weren't politicians at all. They were physics professors. Moniz was the head of the physics department at MIT.
I remember Moniz. He had that distinct, long, gray hair. He looked like he belonged in a lab, not a White House Situation Room.
And that's exactly the point. When you are dealing with nuclear stockpiles, you don't necessarily want a guy who is good at shaking hands in Iowa. You want someone who understands atomic physics.
Yeah, that is a comfort.
And the final bucket is the policy specialists.
Like military guys.
Yes, retired generals like John Kelly, or bankers like Stephen Mnuchin, people who bring specific technical or leadership expertise from the private sector or military.
So you find your person from one of these pools, you convince them to quit their secure job, and then you have to get them confirmed by the Senate.
The confirmation hurdle.
And usually the Senate just rubber stamps this, doesn't it? The attitude is kind of, you won the election, let him have his team.
Historically, yes, that was the norm. The rejection rate is tiny. The last time a nominee was outright rejected by a floor vote was John Tower way back in 1989.
But the sources highlight that the process itself has become a real battlefield lately.
It has. It's not just about competence anymore. It's deeply ideological.
There was that moment in 2017 with Betsy DeVos that really illustrated this shift.
Oh, it was historic. She was up for Secretary of Education. The Senate was completely deadlocked, 50-50.
Wow.
For the first time in the history of the Republic, the Vice President Mike Pence had to actually go to the Senate floor to cast the tie-breaking vote to confirm a cabinet member.
That's incredible.
It shows that the rubber stamp era is effectively over. Every appointment is now a major political skirmish.
So assuming you survive the skirmish, you're in. You get the badge. Now we have to talk about what this group actually looks like, because the optics of the cabinet seem to be almost as important as the qualifications.
Absolutely. The cabinet is the primary visual representation of the administration.
Right.
If you look at photos from Nixon or Reagan, it is very monochromatic, a sea of older white men in gray suits. But starting with Clinton and really accelerating through Bush and Obama, there was this massive pressure to make the cabinet look like America.
Meaning demographic diversity becomes a primary metric for selection.
Yes, and interestingly, George W. Bush had one of the most ethnically diverse cabinets in history up to that point. It wasn't just a Democratic priority.
But then we see a shift again with Trump in 2017. The sources noted it wasn't just less diverse racially, it was distinctively older.
They called it the senior look.
The senior look. I love that phrasing.
The average age was 63. Compare that to JFK's cabinet, which averaged 47.
That's a huge gap.
It signals a completely different value system, prioritizing long, established tenure in business or the military over the fresh face dynamic.
There's also this fascinating concept of the team of rivals. The idea that you should intentionally hire people who hate you, or at least people who disagree with you, to sharpen your thinking.
It's the classic Lincoln model. Obama tried this by keeping Robert Dates, a Republican, as defense secretary and bringing in Chuck Hagel. The theory is that if everyone agrees with you, you have a massive blind spot. You need friction to create good policy.
But looking at the notes on the projected 2025 landscape, it feels like that dynamic is being replaced by something entirely different. The sources mention the 2025 Trump cabinet projections and bring up a specific tension with external figures like Elon Musk.
This is where the modern definition of cabinet gets really blurry. The source material suggests a potential conflict between the official cabinet and what you might call the influencer cabinet.
Like a shadow cabinet.
In a way, yes. Imagine you are the Secretary of Transportation in 2025. You are the constitutional officer. You have the official seal. But then you have someone like Elon Musk, who holds no office, but has the president's ear and a massive public platform,
Right.
who actually sets the policy. If the president listens to the external advisor more than the confirmed secretary, the official title just becomes irrelevant.
It totally breaks the chain of command. I mean,
Yeah.
if I'm a staffer at the Department of Transportation, do I listen to my boss, the secretary? Or do I listen to the billionaire who was tweeting with the president last night?
That is the core tension. And it leads us to the daily reality of the job. You have the title, you have the massive department, but do you have the access? We assume these people are meeting constantly, like knights at the round table.
But the data on this is shocking. I mean, it completely shattered my mental image of how the White House operates.
It is easily the most telling statistic in the research. Let's look at the meeting frequency. Ronald Reagan. He was a big believer in delegation and debate. He held 36 cabinet meetings in his first year alone.
That's a real working group. It's 3 times a month.
Now look at Bill Clinton. Only 6 in his first year.
That is a steep drop-off.
And Joe Biden. The sources indicate that in his full 4-year term, there were only 9 full cabinet meetings.
Wait, pause on that. 9 meetings in 4 years.
Yes.
That's not a governing body. That's a reunion.
It's barely a reunion. It's
Wow.
twice a year. It tells us that for the Biden administration, the cabinet meeting, as a real decision-making forum, was effectively dead.
So why have them at all? If you're only meeting twice a year, clearly you aren't debating nuclear strategy or hashing out the federal budget.
It's theater. For many presidents, especially Nixon, the meeting was just a PR stunt.
Really?
Nixon ran a very closed White House, guards, no entry signs, very isolated. But he would stage these elaborate cabinet meetings, invite the press in for the first 5 minutes to take pictures, just to prove to the country he was listening to his team.
It's the corporate equivalent of a stock photo. Look at us collaborating.
Exactly. Or it's used for team spirit at the very beginning of a term, just to bond the group. But once the actual work starts, presidents quickly realize that a room with 25 people is a terrible place to make complex decisions.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you are discussing a hostage crisis, why is the Secretary of Agriculture sitting there? It's a waste of everyone's time.
But I imagine it's also a place for the president to assert dominance publicly. The sources mention a pretty intense moment with Obama and Chuck Hagel.
Yes, this was a classic moment of public enforcement. Obama was getting really frustrated with the slow pace of releasing prisoners from Guantanamo Bay.
Right.
So, in the middle of a full cabinet meeting, he turns to his chief of staff, points at Chuck Hagel, his defense secretary, who is sitting right there at the table, and basically says, "Get with Hagel and fix this."
Ouch. He didn't even address Hagel directly. He told his staffer to fix Hagel.
Exactly. It's a power move. It signals to everyone in the room who is actually in charge and who is falling behind.
Brutal. But from the other side of the table, the secretary's side, why do you even go to these useless meetings if that's what happens?
It's the FaceTime economy. We have to remember, the president is the busiest human on earth. A cabinet secretary might go 6 entire months without a one-on-one meeting. So the cabinet meeting is their only guaranteed chance to see the boss.
Just to prove you exist.
George W. Bush's secretary actually described this phenomenon. They called it hovering.
I love this detail in the sources.
It's amazing. The meeting ends, and instead of leaving and going back to their departments, the secretaries just linger. They hover around the president's chair, awkwardly, hoping to get 30 seconds to pitch an idea or resolve a turf war before the Secret Service whisks him away.
It's so humanizing. I mean,
Yeah.
these are some of the most powerful administrators in America acting like interns trying to catch the CEO by the elevator.
And sometimes that distance leads to genuine embarrassment. You have to hear the Reagan story.
The reception line incident.
Yes. President Reagan was hosting a reception at the White House. He's shaking hands, working the room, being his charming self. He walks up to a man, shakes his hand warmly, and asks, "How are things in your city, Mr. Mayor?"
Oh, no.
The man was Sam Pierce. He was Reagan's own Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. He'd been in the cabinet for years, and the president simply didn't recognize him.
That is devastating. But it perfectly encapsulates the problem. You can hold the title of secretary, you can run a department with thousands of employees, and yet be completely invisible to the actual center of power.
One of Jimmy Carter's officials summed it up best. He called the meetings almost useless and desultory.
Desultory. That is a brutal word for a historian to use. It means lacking a plan, purpose, or enthusiasm. So let's get to the real core of this deep dive. We have a body that doesn't legally exist, meets rarely, and is sometimes unrecognizable to the boss. What is the actual power dynamic here?
This brings us to what the sources call the power paradox. Individually, these people are titans.
Right, they have huge budgets.
Exactly. The Secretary of Defense commands the global military. The Secretary of State is the face of America to the entire world, but collectively. As a group sitting at that mahogany table, they are incredibly weak.
because they can't outvote the president. They have no leverage as a union.
Right. There is no doctrine of collective responsibility like you see in Britain. A political scientist named Anthony King put it perfectly. He said, "The president doesn't sum up at the end of the meeting. He is the meeting."
He is the meeting. That really clarifies the hierarchy. It's a royal court, not a board of directors.
And this structural weakness leads to a phenomenon the sources call the enemy within.
Which sounds incredibly dramatic for a group of people you intentionally hired.
It does, but it's remarkably accurate. Charles Dawes, who was vice president to Calvin Coolidge, said cabinet members are a president's natural enemies.
Why? Why would they be enemies?
Because they go native.
Going native, meaning they get sucked into their own department's culture.
Exactly. Let's say you are appointed Secretary of Agriculture. You arrive in Washington fully loyal to the president and his agenda, but day after day, you are surrounded by career officials who only care about farming subsidies. You are constantly lobbied by agricultural groups.
You start seeing the world through their eyes.
Right. Pretty soon, you start fighting for the agriculture department against the president's planned budget cuts. You become the department's ambassador to the president rather than the president's ambassador to the department.
I see. So the president looks around that big table and doesn't see a unified team. He just sees a bunch of people asking for more money and complaining about his policies.
Precisely. To counter this, George W. Bush actually required some cabinet members to work inside the White House complex just to keep an eye on them, but it caused massive consternation.
They hated being babysat.
Exactly. And this going native issue is exactly why the cabinet often loses the real power struggle to the other group we need to talk about, the EXOP.
The Executive Office of the President. Now, for those of us who aren't political science majors, we really need to distinguish this. How is the EXOP different from the cabinet?
Think of it like a military campaign. The cabinet secretaries are the generals out in the field. They are running the tanks, the infantry, managing the logistics. They are busy managing massive, complex operations miles and miles away from headquarters.
Okay, so they are deep in the trenches.
The XRP, which includes the chief of staff, the national security advisor, the press secretary, they are the aides inside the tent with the commander-in-chief. They don't run agencies, they don't have thousands of employees, but they're in the room where it happens every single day.
And proximity is power.
Absolute power. The general in the field has to schedule a flight and wait weeks to see the boss. The aide in the tent just leans over the desk and whispers in his ear.
That makes total sense.
That is why in modern presidencies, the national security advisor, who is purely staff, is often much more powerful than the Secretary of State, who is an official cabinet member.
This connects perfectly back to what we were saying about 2025 and the Elon Musk dynamic. It feels like we are seeing a shift where the tent is getting incredibly crowded with informal advisors and the field generals are getting more and more isolated.
That is absolutely the trend line. If you look at the Biden administration holding only 9 meetings in 4 years, and then look at the potential for a 2025 administration where external billionaires and close White House staff drive the actual policy, the cabinet as an institution is fading.
To becoming a group of mid-level administrators rather than high-level advisors.
Exactly. It ultimately reflects the president's personal management style. A president who wants broad debate, like Lincoln or maybe Reagan uses the cabinet. A president who wants tight control, like Nixon, or a modern centralized executive, relies almost entirely on the EXOP and that inner circle.
So the next time we see that photo of the mahogany table, we shouldn't see a board of directors. We should see a tool belt. And the president gets to decide whether to pick up the tools or just leave them in the box.
That is the perfect analogy. And the provocative thought I would leave you with as we wrap up is this. We typically obsess over who gets appointed Secretary of State or Attorney General. We all watch the dramatic confirmation hearings on the news.
Right, it's great TV.
But if the trend holds, if the royal court of informal advisors, tech billionaires, and close staff is truly taking over, are we spending all our time looking at the wrong people?
Wow.
Robert Shrum said, "No one in a cabinet outshines the president." But are we moving toward a world where the cabinet doesn't even shine at all? Where the real decisions that affect your life are made by people who never sat for a confirmation hearing, never took an oath of office, but just happen to have the president's personal cell phone number?
That is a thought that completely changes how I'll look at the political headlines next year. It's not just about who holds the official title, it's about who actually holds the attention. Something for you to definitely keep an eye on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden machinery of the executive branch.
Always a pleasure.